Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all attendees are in a listen-only mode. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now, I'd like to turn the webinar over to Maria Valdesera. Maria, you may begin.
Thank you, Greg, and hi everyone and welcome. My name is Maria Valdesera and I'm joined by my colleague Noemi Mendez. We are going to be showing you how to access Puerto Rico data through our Microdata Access Tool. So just a few things to note. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A panel for this session. And if you could please mark the all panelists option, just so everybody that's in the chat can see it. That would really help us out. Again, use the Q&A panel, not the chat panel. We will be sending some information through that as well. But just to get started, I wanted to go over some of the basics of using the Microdata Access Tool. So the first is when talking about the Microdata Access Tool, it's important to note that this data is coming from the public use microdata. So this data is anonymized, so there is no personally identifiable information associated with it. Since the Census Bureau protects the confidentiality of our respondents by removing identifiers, these microdata files permit users with special data needs to prepare virtually any tabulation. Now, these microdata files are accessible through data.census.gov/MDAT, which we will be diving into today, but they are also available through our application programming interface or API, as well as through download on our file transfer protocol site or FTP. And since this microdata is pulling individual responses, the tables created in MDAT must be tabulated and weighted by the user. So in my opinion, this is the biggest thing that separates the Microdata Access Tool from data you might find on the main data.census.gov site, since on data.census.gov, there is no option to create a custom table, and all tables on data.census.gov are pre-tabulated. So continuing on with the differences between data.census.gov and Microdata Access, they are both pulling from survey responses, which are individual records, whereas the data.census.gov files are estimates that are created using those individual records that are only available to Census Program Area staff. The Microdata Access Tool instead edits those individual records to protect confidentiality applied. And then those estimates are created using a sample of individual records that have been processed for use by the public. So again, data.census.gov is using our internal files that give you estimates, whereas the Microdata Access Tool uses that public use file that has estimates that have been edited for use by the public. Now, this slide is just going over some of the pros and cons of using data.census.gov and Microdata Access. So on the left side of the slide in that teal color, we have the data.census.gov section. So some of the pros that are associated with data.census.gov includes that it provides more precise estimates since we are pulling from a larger sample size, wider range of data sets, fewer limitations to available geographies, and there's no in-depth knowledge of the variables required. On the cons, it is limited to cross-tabulations and tables that are predetermined by data providers, and data.census.gov does have limited ability to customize tables. Then on the right side of the slide with the purple with Microdata Access, these are the pros. They provide custom estimates when a pre-tabulated census table is not available. There are more historical data available, and they include data sets not available in data.census.gov, like our current population survey. Now for the cons, since this data is able to be tabulated and weighted by the user, we do have limited geographies available. Since it is pulling from a smaller sample, it does provide less precise estimates. It does require some more in-depth knowledge of variables, and no margins of error are provided. So again, when it comes down to your needs as a data user, it's important to know the advantages and disadvantages of using either of these tools for your data needs. So continuing on with those differences between the tabulated data on data.census.gov and the Microdata Access Tool, we can see here that data.census.gov uses aggregated data tables for a given geography, while the microdata instead uses a set of edited survey responses that provides more detail on an individual level. So for example, the data highlighted in the data.census.gov table, which is on the top portion of the slide, this provides an approximation of how many males worked in computer and mathematical occupations. Now, again, this data can still be very useful, but depending on the needs of the data user, they may want to get a little bit more granular. So that's where the Microdata Access Tool comes in. And here you can go line by line of anonymized responses and see that the particular respondent highlighted in the screenshot on the bottom portion of the slide was a male who lives in Maryland and has an occupation specifically of a web developer. So that's actually based on the codes that are representing the different state, sex, and occupation in each of the variable columns. Now, continuing on with specifically what we are going to be looking at today, what is the difference between the standard ACS PUMS or public use microdata sample and the Puerto Rico PUMS, which is called the Puerto Rico Community Survey. So with the standard ACS, it provides data on, ethnicity, detailed Hispanic origin, ancestry, place of birth, residence 1 year ago, etc. For the contiguous United States, as well as Hawaii and Alaska. So that's going to be the US outside of Puerto Rico. So you can get related variables for the Puerto Rican community or population inside the US when it comes to the Standard American Community Survey, whereas the Puerto Rico Community Survey provides data for the population of Puerto Rico specifically and is separate from the data in the Standard American Community Survey. So that's just a little bit of background. I'll be showing examples from both the Standard ACS and the Puerto Rico Community Survey in this webinar. But I also just wanted to highlight an important resource that is also available. This is what we call data dictionaries. So we have some from the American Community Survey as well as the current population survey. So this ACS PUMS data dictionary is broken out into different sections of variables, including basic variables, housing unit variables, and person variables. So if you are not familiar with MDAT and you'd like to dive in to some of the technical documentation, this is a great place to start because you will find all of the variables that are available in the PUMS dataset for any given year. So the dictionary will give you the name of the variable, whether it's a character or a numeric variable, the length of the variable, a brief description of the variable, and the possible response options or recoded values. So again, that is all going to be found in those data dictionaries. I highly recommend taking a look at them. They have all of the variables listed out, and it's also great for people that are putting in variables into programs like SAS, which is a statistical software used to analyze census data. Now, but moving on with our demo, I do want to get right into it. So our first example is going to be looking at sex by education by Puerto Rican ethnicity in Florida. So, you can still get sex by education data, in data.census.gov, but if you want it specifically with the Puerto Rican population in a particular state, that will not be in the standard tables available in data.census.gov. So that's why we're going to use the Microdata Access Tool to build our own table. So I'm going to go straight into MDAT using Google Chrome. This is the URL, so it's just data.census.gov/MDAT. It will take you to this It will take you to this main landing page. So this will be the dataset and vintage selection screen. Right now, we are on the ACS 1-year estimates, public use microdata sample. This is the default, and then it will update to show the most recent year available. That is 2022. So we are going to stick on the default for this example, but I will show you how to select the Puerto Rico Community Survey dataset in our next couple of examples. So we're going to hit the next button in the bottom right corner of the screen, and this will load our variables. So there are two ways of selecting variables within MDAT. The first is to use the variable selection screen. So this is where this allows you to type in the variable code into the search bar if you know it. Again, that's where those data dictionaries really do come in handy, since you can, scroll through, look and see if there are particular codes that you'll want to use, and then you can use that in the variable search bar. Or if you aren't sure what the variable code is, you can use the label search bar. So this allows you to search for a keyword or phrase related to your variables. For this example, we are going to find 3 different variables. So the first being sex. We can type that into our label search bar, and here we can see this first variable that is available. If we click on the empty checkbox next to it, you can see that it's now been added to our data cart. And then we can erase our search and look for our other 2 variables. So the next is education. Again, this only pulls up one variable. It is educational attainment. We can also click on the details button over here to see exactly what values are contained within this variable. So this variable in particular has all the way from no schooling completed all the way down to a doctorate degree with values in between. So we are going to click on this checkbox and add that to our data cart as well. And lastly, we are looking for ethnicity data, specifically the Hispanic or Latino ethnicity. So I'm going to type in Hispanic. And here is the variable that I'm looking at. It's HISP. It is our recoded detailed Hispanic origin variable. And again, if you click on the details, you can see exactly what values are contained within this variable. I can see here that Puerto Rican is a value within this variable, so I definitely want to choose this one. So we are going to add this to our data cart as well. And now that we've selected all of our variables, we'll then move on to the Select Geographies tab. And this is usually how I move through MDAT. I'll just move from left to right across the top of the screen. This allows me to, build on the different elements of my table so that by the end, I have a finished product of my customized table that I've created. But now now that I've clicked on the Select Geographies tab, I'm looking for this data for the state of Florida. Again, you can see that there is very limited geographies available. So I am going to select state and then select Florida. Now you can certainly select more than one state if you want to compare different states to one another. For right now, I am just going to select the one state. Once you've selected your geographies, though, you can then move on to the data cart. Now, this is where you can limit the universe of your specific variable. So, say you only wanted this data for males in Florida. You could uncheck female, and that value will be removed from your table. For this example, I did want to show another feature of MDAT, which if you click on our Hispanic or Latino or recoded detailed Hispanic origin variable rather, you can see that there are 24 different values within this variable. Since I know I only want Puerto Rico, I can actually uncheck the include in universe checkbox, and that will deselect all of those values. So then I can just go in and reselect Puerto Rican, and you can see that now only one of 24 responses will be added to my table once we view the data. So now I'm going to move to the table layout tab. Again, if you'd like to edit any of these other variables, you could do so. Like if you wanted to say, only have data for those with a regular high school diploma and above. You could just uncheck all of these other values, but we'll just stick with the unchanged sex and educational attainment variables for right now. But once you have edited these variables to your liking, then you'll move on to the table layout tab. And this is where you'll decide which variables will go in the columns and the rows of your table. So you can see that right now we have sex in the columns and then our selected geographies, Hispanic origin, and educational attainment in the rows. So in order to change this, you're just going to click and drag the variable names up to either the columns or the rows, depending on where you want them placed in your table. So I will be editing these tables, in the most readable format to me, but certainly that's the great thing about MDAT. It is so customizable, so you can decide what variables go into the columns and which ones go into the rows. So now I'm also going to move our Hispanic origin variable as well into the columns, since the educational attainment variable does have a lot of values to work with. So you can see that that is what the rows are going to look like. And then we have our selected geographies, Puerto Rican, and then it'll be broken out into male and female. Now you won't see any data in this table layout view, but once you click on the View Table button in the bottom right corner of the screen, the table will now be populated with data. So this will give you the total column here, and then we have it broken out into male and female. Again, for the Puerto Rican population of Florida by educational attainment. So a few things to note here, you can toggle to show, to get rid of that show total column here if you just want to see male and female. But if you want to calculate percentages, I do recommend leaving that total column alone. This is another way to move around the variables. If you get to this point and you are unhappy with how the table looks, you can use these variable chips and move them either on the rows or on the columns, and those will be changed. And however you move the variable chips around, and the table will reload to show those changes. Up top here, this is how you will change the data set and vintage if you'd like to do that, as well as changing the geography and the weighting of the tables. The other thing that I wanted to show is the download and share button. So if you click on download share, there are a few ways that you'll be able to get these tables in a different format. So the first way is to download the table view as a CSV. This will allow you to see this table in usually an Excel file. For the layout that you've created on MDAT, it will show up in your Excel file as a CSV. So it'll maintain that layout. You'll still get all of the variable names, all of the geographies, and all of the labels that you've created. Then you can also extract the raw data. So this comes as a CSV or a JSON format as well. So if you wanted to get those individual responses that I mentioned earlier, that's how you would get this, by extracting the raw data. And then once we scroll down here, if you'd like to bookmark this table, you can do so by copying it and adding it to your bookmarks tab. And then if you use the Microdata API, we also have API queries available all on this one page. So I did want to break, Noemi, if there were any relevant questions to that first example, or if somebody needs me to demo something else related to our first example. I will be getting into Puerto Rico community survey in our next example, just for everybody's awareness.
No, it looks like everything is pretty clear as far as that. So no
All right,
questions.
Great. Thank you guys so much. So I will move on to our next demo, because I want to make sure that we take a look at some of the data that actually was surveying people in Puerto Rico. So this is looking at the ability to speak English by selected age groups. So we do have tables with the ability to speak English, but they have pretty wide range of age groups. When I was checking them yesterday, you know, they had under 18 and then like 18 to 64 and then 65 and over. But there is a way with MDAT to create your own custom age groups. It involves a process known as creating a recode. So I'm going to show you how to do that in this next example and then in the example after that. So a recode is basically just taking the original variable and creating groups of your own customized liking to within that next variable. So you're basically creating again, a customized variable from the original variable that we have within MDAT. So an example of this too would be, you know, if we looked at our educational attainment variable, for example, if you wanted to have, say, kindergarten through 5th grade in one group and you wanted to group all of those statistics together, you would then create a recode within the site and then say, you know, label it as elementary school or something like that. So you're just, you know, grouping those values from an original variable into one. So we're going to show you how to do that. Again, just for a recap, we're looking at the ability to speak English by selected age groups in Puerto Rico. So I'm going to go back into MDAT, and the way to get to the main landing page of MDAT again is to just click on that microdata button up in the top left corner of the screen. And it'll take us back to our vintage and data set selection screen. Now for this example, we are going to switch our data set. So if you click on this tiny downward facing arrow, you'll be able to see all of the data sets that are available. So we do have the ACS 1-year estimates for Puerto Rico, as well as the 5-year estimates. So if we click on the Puerto Rico public use microdata sample, we can see that, again, the most recent year is 2022, but you can also select older years if you'd like. For right now, I will just select our most recent year of 2022 for the 1-year Puerto Rico estimates. Then I'll click the next button. And for this example, we need 2 variables, the first one being age, and that actually does appear at the top of the list, so I'll just select it first. And when I do that, I see this message that says, this variable is continuous and can only go to values in table cells. Create a group recode to use elsewhere, and I'll check that again just so everybody can get a good look at it. So this is not an error message. It's just saying that because of the way that the variable is set up, we are going to have to create a recode in order to include it on our table. So keeping that in mind, we're also going to select our other variable. So that's going to be the ability to speak English. So I'll type my keyword in the label search bar as English. And here is our label for ability to speak English. The variable code is ENG. So we're going to add that to our data cart as well. And those are the only 2 variables we're going to select for this particular example. Moving on to our Select Geographies tab, we can see that the only availability is state, which will be Puerto Rico, and then public use microdata area, which I will be talking about in our next example. But since this is the Puerto Rico Community Survey sample, that is the only available geography under the state filter. So we're going to select Puerto Rico. And then I'm going to click on the data cart tab, and this is where we are going to start on our recode. So looking at this age variable, we can see that it has this slider here from the 1-year-old age group all the way up to 99, which is our top coded value for this group. That just is to protect the confidentiality of anybody above 99 years old. But again, you can see that this is what indicates a continuous variable, since we don't have, little checkboxes for 1, 2, 3, etc., all the way down. So this is why we need to create our recode. And so to do this, we're going to click on the Create Custom Group button, which is above the variable values. And this is where we're going to start our recode. So we're going to, I'm going to show you how to create a few custom groups in a couple of different ways. The first is just to do this manually. So if you wanted to have your group be the under 18 population, for example, you can change the group label to something like under 18. You can do under 18 years old, ages 1 to 17, whatever you'd like. In that group label, I'm just going to stick with under 18 for right now. And then you're going to decide what values are going to be contained in your group. So we're going to click on this 1 to 99 years value first, but we're going to change that end range so it doesn't include 99-year-olds. Instead, it'll include the ages 17 to 1 to 17, since we are looking for the population under 18. We'll include 18 in our next group. We also want to include this under 1 year option, since that also falls under the category of those under the age of 18. So we're going to click on that checkbox. And then we're going to click on the Save Group button right below the variable, or excuse me, the value selection. So we're going to click Save Group. And now we have our under 18 group that is saved with the label that we've created, as well as the values that we specified in our first recoded group. So now we have the other values, which is 18 to 99, in this not elsewhere classified group. So that is where we'll actually click Edit Group, and then we can go through and create our other groups that we want to have. So if you wanted to do, say, 18 to 24, 18 to 24-year-olds, that would be your second group. So then you would just go through, click between 18 and 99, and then change your end range to reflect your group label. So that is 18 to 24, and then we have the value starting at 18 and then ending at 24. So then we can save this group, and we'll just go through and, classify these other values in other groups. However, if we know that, say, we want groups of 5 for the rest of these variables, or excuse me, the rest of the values within this variable, we can also use another feature within recoding, which is called the auto group feature. So we can click on auto group. We can see this button up top here, and then we can go to the between 25 and 99 option. So if we do that, we can see that there is a start range, which is 25, which is where we left off, and then the end range of 99. So say you only just want the rest of the age groups to be groups of 5. You can change this to reflect that. So this will just be groups of 5. And then we'll click on the auto group feature. And then this will automatically create our groups based on those parameters. So we have between 25 and 29, 30 and 34, 35 and 39, all the way down until we hit 99. So this is really good if you know you want equal groups within your recode. We can see that our recode is now labeled as AGEP RC1, and it has 17 values within it. So now we are going to move on to the table layout, since we have all of the values from this original variable now in their own little groups. So we're going to click on that table layout tab. And here are a few other differences that I wanted to point out. The first being that our original age variable is in this values and table cells option. Remember, if we went back to our select variables selection screen, the original variable was not able to be placed into the rows or the columns of the table, which is why we need to create a recode. So our recode is actually not on the table currently, and that is because it says it may restrict the sample universe. But we know that since we included all possible values from the original variable in our recode, we know that this does not restrict the sample universe of our variable. So there are a few things that I want to do. The first being moving our selected geographies up to the columns with that ability to speak English variable. And then we're going to move our age recode up to the rows. And so this is what the table will look like. Another thing that I also wanted to mention is that since this variable is in the values and table cells option, it's defaulting to average of age. Now, for the most part, you're going to want to have this value actually set to count so that you can have all of the totals which within each table cell that you have instead of an average of age. So we are going to use that drop down. And again, click on count, and this will give you the actual population totals for each of the categories that we've created rather than that average count. So again, it won't show you any data just yet, but once we click on the View Table button, the table, oops, let's see, do have a little bit of a glitch happening here. My apologies. There we go. So that does sometimes happen. It always helps to refresh the page if you see, question marks and zeros occur. But we do have our table loaded here with data. You can see here on the left side within the rows that this is our recoded age variable. It has all of the groups that we created, including ones that we, did manually and with the auto group feature. And then that breaks it down into our ability to speak English variable in Puerto Rico. So that is our second example. Did we have any related questions that haven't been answered before I moved on, Noemi?
No, we're all caught up.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So I did want to go over public use microdata areas, or PUMAs, before we jump into our final example. So just for everybody's awareness, PUMAs are geographies of 100,000 people or more that can be used to identify most cities and many metro areas. So while this does not cover all cities and metro areas, PUMAs do cover large swaths of the population and can be identified by a 5-digit code that is unique within each state. So PUMAs are nested within states and do cover the entire nation. So you will be able to get full geographic coverage when you use PUMAs in MDAT. We define PUMAs after each decennial census as part of a program involving our state data centers, or SDCs, and they are used for the decennial and ACS public use microdata sample data. So the ACS and Puerto Rico Community Survey also use PUMAs to distribute their respective period estimates. And just for a bit of background, the decennial census population counts and updated census tracts are critical for defining PUMAs, and census tracts and counties are the building blocks of PUMAs. So in order to find these PUMAs within MDAT, and for right now, we do have only 2 PUMAs available within MDAT. But you would go into the Select Geographies tab, then you would click on Public Use Microdata Area, Puerto Rico, and then select your 2 PUMAs. So that is what we're going to show for our last example. This is looking at sex by poverty for the population 40 years and over for those Puerto Rico PUMAs. So I'm going to go back into MDAT and click on that microdata button. And again, this will default to the standard ACS estimate. So if you are specifically looking for the Puerto Rico PUMs, you'll need to click on that downward facing arrow and then make sure to select the Puerto Rico public use microdata sample. So we're going to stick with 2022 and then click that next button. Now for this example, we do need 3 variables. So the first one again is age. So we're going to click on that age variable, and we do get our little warning message up top here, but now we know how to create a recode, and I will be recoding some variables in this example as well. Next up is poverty. So I'm going to type that into our label search bar. And we do have an income to poverty ratio recode that is also a continuous variable. So we're going to have to create 2 recodes for this example, but I'm going to keep them pretty simple. And then our last variable is just going to be sex. So I'm going to type that into our label search bar and add that to our data cart as well. So now I'm going to click on that Select Geographies tab and select the public use microdata area, Puerto Rico, and then select our 2 Puerto Rico pumas. Then we're going to click on the data cart tab. And again, this is where we're going to just have some, recoding happen. The first is looking at that poverty variable. So I'm going to click on the Create Custom Group button. And I'm only going to create 3 groups for this example, just to keep things simple. So the first that I'm going to do is just below poverty. So this will include the below 501%. But I'm going to change the end range again to 99. And this is something to keep in mind when working with those continuous variables. And then I'm going to click Save Group. And we have our first recode group, again, below poverty with the 0 to 99. Then we're going to click on the Edit Group button. And we're going to do at or above poverty. And this is going to include between 100 and 500 and then 501% or more. Again, you can certainly break this down even further if you wanted to do, 100 to 199 and then 200 to 299. You could certainly do that. But just for right now, I am going to keep it simple. Again, the same principles apply when creating these recodes. Just make sure that you are including everything that you want to include within the values of the original variable. So we're going to click on this Save Group button. And now we just have the -1 value left. So we're going to edit this. We're going to change this to be not in poverty universe. Again, you can label these however you'd like. But then I am going to add this NA value and we're going to save this group, and that will be our 3 groups available for the poverty recode that we've created. So I am going to now go to age, and we're going to do something again very similar, just having a little bit more simple groupings. But again, I want everybody to test out MDAT, see if they have any trouble, and then come back to us if they have any questions, because there definitely is a learning curve. Hopefully this gives you guys just a few basic tips, especially when working with this level of customization. But we are going to click on the Create Custom Group button. And again, similarly to what we did with our poverty variable, we're just going to do below 40. We're going to add our 1 to 99 range, but we're going to change 99 to 39. And then also add that under 1 year option, since that does encompass below 40 as well. And then we're going to click Save Group. Then we're going to go to Not Elsewhere Classified, and we're just going to label this as 40 and above. And then all we have to do there is click on that checkbox next to between 40 and 99. So we're going to save this group. And now we have our 2 recodes at the bottom here. Again, they're coded by RC1. So now that that is complete, we're going to go to the Table Layout tab. And again, just a few things to note. We can see these continuous variables in the Values and Table Cells option. And then we see our other variables that we've recoded in the Not on Table section. So there's a few things that I wanted to do first. The first thing being moving the selected geographies up to the columns, and then clicking and dragging and moving the sex variable to the rows. Next, we're going to move our age recode up to the columns, and then our poverty recode to the rows. And this is another thing that I wanted to mention. The order of the variables, you see how sex is on top and then the poverty recode is right below it. That is being reflected on the table. So it does matter the order in which you move these variables around. And that will, again, be reflected on the table if you wanted to change them around. Say here, if we move that, you can see how it changes the view of the table itself. So again, clicking and dragging those variables. The other thing, again, that I wanted to do and make sure that everybody does, if they are not looking for, average of age, or in this case, average of the income to poverty ratio recode, is to make sure that they use that value in table cells dropdown to include the count. So again, this will give you the total population. It'll give you that total column that you can use to calculate percentages. And it is what most people are going to be using these data tables for if they are not downloading the raw data. So now I'll click on the View Table button and we will get some data available. And here we again have our 2 recodes that we've created for both of the Puerto Rico Pumas. And, again, this is data that you would not be able to get on data.census.gov. It's completely customized with the, recodes that we've created here today. So hopefully you guys can dive into this a little bit more. And please come back to us if you have any other questions on using microdata. I did also want to give just some guidance for data users. We do have how-to materials for using Microdata Access, and I'll be sure to include a link on this slide as well when it is sent out with the educational materials that'll be put up on Census Academy. So again, we have PDFs, the data dictionaries, video tutorials, other recorded webinars. All of those are going to be on that how-to materials page available through our resources page. We also have the ability to sign up for email updates. So that'll give you updates on data.census.gov, the Census API, and of course, what we've gone over today, which is a Microdata Access Tool. Again, it'll also give you, the featured video tutorials, the newsletter, any upcoming webinars that you guys might want to attend in the future. And it's just a great way to keep up to date on all of the goings on that is happening within our program. And then finally, I did want to just say that if you have any feedback or follow-up questions after today's webinar, our email address is census.data@census.gov. That is the best way to get in contact with us. We also have our main data.census.gov resources page linked there as well. So again, we are always looking for feedback, questions, other suggestions that anybody has on data.census.gov or the API or the Microdata Access Tool, especially with the Microdata Access Tool, since that is still currently in development. I also wanted to let everybody know of our data.census.gov workshop. So that does include a workshop specifically on the basics of using the Microdata Access Tool. I teach that class. It's just a longer form class where I go into Microdata Access. You'll also have the opportunity to complete individual exercises on your own with, other participants. So that's more of a smaller class. We do have attendance limited to 50 participants per section. And we'll have that, I believe we have that schedule coming out relatively soon. So we do have our registration linked. That'll give you all of the classes that are available. And we have 3 classes on data.census.gov, the main site, as well as, so we have one on basics, the advanced usage, and then one specifically on mapping, as well as a basics class for the Census API. So I highly recommend if anybody is, still struggling, or if they want something a little bit more long form, it's definitely a more conversational, especially since we have, less attendees. I definitely recommend signing up for them. They're completely free, and we do have them pretty regularly. So with that, I did want to just thank everybody for attending today's webinar. I did want to see if there were any other outstanding questions in the Q&A panel that might be worth addressing for everybody. Noemi?
I just want to reiterate that this data tool is just for microdata, which are the individual responses. So the data.census.gov tool has the aggregated data. So if you have questions about using data.census.gov, feel free to contact us. If you're looking for something in particular to Puerto Rico, we can definitely work with you to find the table. So like I said, this is microdata. So these are individual responses. And then the other tool has already pre-constructed tables that have the aggregated data. I'm sorry if we didn't make that very obvious in the beginning, but I just wanted to make sure because we were getting some questions about the tools.
Of course, and I can go back and just have this slide up too, just for everybody's awareness. So data.census.gov again is looking at using our internal files. It has pre-tabulated tables. There are still a lot of tables that you'll be able to find for Puerto Rico on data.census.gov. But if you're looking for something a bit more customizable, and if you want to build your own tables by selecting the specific variables that we have to offer from the public use file, that's when you would use Microdata Access. So if you have any questions about that, again, feel free to reach out to us. If we can't find a table that is available for Puerto Rico on data.census.gov, we always do, we tend to recommend if it's, something that you're looking for the ACS, we definitely like to recommend the Microdata Access Tool to people if they're looking for, a tabulation that is a little bit more customized. Again, with the caveat that it is a different data set, and there are a lot less precise estimates and limited geographies available. But yeah, I definitely want to reiterate that this is different than what you would find on data.census.gov. And there is still, a lot of tables to choose from on data.census.gov. So if you're, if you have any questions about accessing that as well, we are still open to helping with that as well. Again, using our email address as census.data@census.gov. But if there were not any more questions after that, again, I do want to thank everybody for attending today.